Hello, Heron.
Hello, Tom.
So it's, I guess, been probably 10 days since we last chatted, and I've gone back through your back catalogue, and I'm really enjoying your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
But I wanted to put out a topic to you with regards to online identity, because I think it fits in with some of the meta concepts that you've discussed with a number of your previous guests. And it's something which, obviously, you have a podcast, I have a podcast, I think about quite a bit. There seems to be a lot of narrative, particularly in popular tech journalism currently, with regards to Facebook and what it means for average, everyday people in terms of their identity being online. Yeah. But what's your view with regards to this?
Well, I've just recently begun. I've been on Facebook, for instance, for probably 2 years, but I've only in the last couple weeks actually started using it more effectively. I mean, I put up a profile, and that was basically it. I'd go there once every 3 months and look at it, and I had 10 friends or something. But recently, I've been saving URLs to interesting YouTube videos that I've discovered over the last few years. And I used to, most of my friends are in Skype. Skype is the center of my communications world. And I've got a few friends that I would send these links to every once in a while. And I wanted to send them to more people, but it was sort of a pain in the butt to send them individually. And then I realized I can just post this stuff to Facebook. Anytime I find an interesting video, I just post the URL on my Facebook page, and whoever's are my friends will see that. So I'm just beginning to explore Facebook, really. I don't Twitter.
Certainly. It's an interesting concept. I guess from my own life, I have a very keen sense of who I am online as a person, and in terms of the kind of information that I put out online. And also, I guess I've been on Facebook for probably, it feels like 4 years now, maybe 3.5, 4 years. And I started it because I was doing editorial duties for another podcast, and the guys who were doing it were of college age, and they were on Facebook, and they said, well, you've got to get on Facebook, and I got on Facebook. So I was probably the earliest of my friends of my age group. I'm in my early 30s that got on Facebook, and I've really ridden away since then. And for me personally, because I've lived in the UK, I've lived in different parts of the US, different parts of Australia, a bit of time in Southeast Asia, and also, irrespective of these places that I've been in location, I've also, I have people that I've only communicate with online who I've never met. Yeah. In fact, as I talked with you last time, going to the Bay Area this time to talk at Intel and Stanford, this will be the first time that I will meet a number of people face to face that I've been working with for the past 10 years or more. Yeah. I mean, it's quite surreal in terms of the relationships that one develops.
Well, I don't see it as surreal at all. In fact, most of the people that I consider to be friends, I don't even know what they look like.
Mm.
I've been a hermit most of my life. When I was 21, I had this sort of weird awakening experience, and basically a couple of years after that, I decided that the majority of people in my life were just wasting my time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just decided that I would only allow people in my life who actually contributed to it. So therefore, I had no friends for several years.
I guess I had a similar awakening at a similar time in my life. I mean, certainly that was my experience living in Australia. And even prior to leaving Australia, even in my teens, I actively kind of culled friendship groups when I found my energies or my emotions were being overly taxed by them. So I think there's a kind of shared element there. But the thing that strikes me about Facebook as a technology is the kind of criticism that is coming out currently versus, for example, what exists already in commerce here. I mean, in terms of financial transactions, these kind of things are in no way private. They're very well shared.
Privacy is just not an issue for me. I just don't really give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are a few things, personal things. I have somewhat, I think we talked about my OCD, I don't know if we did or not, but, I mean, luckily it primarily expresses itself as my obsession with linguistics. But it also shows up in other more subtle psychological ways. But nobody knows about that but me, But aside from things like that, I couldn't care less what people know about me.
So it's an interesting. As we're talking, actually, I've pulled out a picture of John Draper or Captain Crunch. Do you know of him?
I've heard of Captain Crunch.
He was the first phone hacker in the early 70s.
Okay, right. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah.
So he was the fellow. I was the first person to put any photographs of him online. He existed in a kind of mystical persona prior to him meeting me in, I think, 1995 in Australia. He was travelling through Australia. And I was, in fact, when I met him, I couldn't believe that it was actually him. The kind of disconnect between the way that he existed in this kind of mythical online back then bulletin board
and the
physical, exactly, the kind of toothless guy in front of me. So there are these extremes, and I think it's interesting because, I mean, certainly I have a sense of myself online which is very distinct to me as a person. And I think particularly listening to your shows, you get elements of who you are online, but I don't have a full sense of you in a kind of personal perspective. Yeah. And I'm not sure whether this is intentional in terms of what you're describing in terms of your hermit existence and this kind of philosophy that you have. But this appears to be something that is quite subconscious to you.
What is subconscious to me?
Well, the fact that basically, I mean, for example, in terms of things like biographical information, photographs, any kind of details of, I don't know, I mean, in terms of the kind of...
I don't find any of that very interesting online. I mean, I'm interested in the ideas, and I used to have used my own portrait for my Facebook and other things, But I realized that I find that a distraction. For instance, in our talking right now, I don't want to see you. I don't want video. I just want your ideas. And I see speakers who have their little picture at the bottom of the brochure. Their smiling faces.
I concur with you. Yes.
And the whole thing just strikes me as irrelevant. I want people to focus on the ideas, not me.
So you are in fact describing perfectly this idea that we exist on in, I guess, the internet domain in terms of our ideas, and this is certainly something that I embrace as well.
Let me say that I talk about two worlds. If you've heard any of these things, maybe I mentioned them: Squish and the Matrix. And they're two. People talk about the real world, and I just think that's such a bullshit concept. It's no more real than where we are now in the Matrix, and they're just different realities. And in Squish, that's a whole different reality. When I'm sitting in Starbucks and I'm talking to a good-looking girl sitting next to me, or some guy, or whoever I'm talking to, that's just a completely different domain than what we're doing here now. And I don't see much in common between the two, actually. And I think this domain is far superior for ideas. When I'm sitting across the table, if you and I were sitting in Starbucks, I would have to. I mean, you put two alpha males together, and you got to deal with all the monkey business. It's all there, and that's why I don't want to look at you. I don't need that. What I need is your voice and your ideas.
I understand that. I mean, I think we're like minds here. So you are, in fact, deconstructing me in describing this circumstance. I guess my concern is that I exist as a real entity as well. And I don't know...
Not real. No, not... I object to that concept of real. They're just different. There are different realities here.
Certainly, without
one
question.
One isn't more real, I don't think. I just think that's... I don't accept that. I mean, I guess I can argue with you if you choose to use that, but...
Yes.
So never mind.
I mean, we are like minds in this fashion here, Aaron. I guess my concern has always been that the values of ideas that are put through the kind of domain that we are discussing currently is still very much, and we use this term when we last spoke, a kind of monastic order. And the real question is getting these, well, for example, I mean, a little bit of background in my own experience. To me, particularly for the past maybe 5 years, possibly even 10 years, I guess doppelganger is too, in some regard, a kind of distant nemesis figure that I've had has been Richard Dawkins. And my experience with him and dealing with him and his people and just the complete antithesis of this vision that a lot of people have of Dawkins has made me think in terms of the fact that you can have what we have in terms of an intellectual community that is very much based on ideas and voice and interaction. And Dawkins is one of many. I mean, basically, let's call them the TED speakers, the people that talk at the TED conferences, okay? Yeah. These people with their books and their faces and these kind of things, this is the domain of ideas for the populace still. So how do we turn it inside out? How do we make the ideas of the faceless intellectuals that exist on the internet be more powerful than the people that get, book deals?
Well, this is how we do it. We're doing it right now, you and me. Certainly.
But I think the issue is whether we need to enter the domain in any way, or whether basically through eclectic and eccentric force, we can just mandate these ideas going into the future. And
God,
certainly,
I'm so glad, Tom. I am so glad you called me tonight. Thank you.
Well, I felt that there was need for a little bit of deconstruction.
I'm so glad you felt that. Really, this is I really enjoy a good conversation with someone who is as weird as I am.
Well, maybe even weirder. Who knows?
Well, we'll see.
I put my toe in both domains, so I don't know. But so I guess listening to your show, and particularly, I mean, you get a lot of people from the Southern Hemisphere, from both parts of the world that I've called home previously, calling into your show. And I think the woman who you spoke to recently from Australia that talked about the Australian election and Rudd.
Yeah, Kathy. Oh, God,
do you know Australia has compulsory voting?
No. Well, I think I do know that. I think I heard that.
Here's the fascinating thing.
Yeah, that is a fascinating idea.
Compulsory
that can lead to a whole different kind of rebellion.
No. Well, there are half a dozen reasons that I left Australia, and compulsory voting is one of them, because it creates a false politicisation. The people that I found in Australia would justify voting for people who were subpar criminals in comparison to the other subpar criminal that they had to vote for.
Yeah.
So what you find is this idolization of these people who really are, bureaucrats by fundamental nature, if not slightly corrupt.
You think that's any different here?
Well, the thing that I like about the US is that you don't have to vote.
No, that's true. I am going to vote for the first time in like 20 years this November. I've voted 3 times in my life. Once when I was 21 for the president. Of course, I lost. And then 20 years later, they voted to ban smoking in public places. So I registered to vote and voted for that and won. And I was even, and I figured I'd never vote again. But in California this November, they're voting to legalize marijuana. So
I grew up in a place where they legalized marijuana. When I was 13, they decriminalized cannabis.
In Australia?
In Australia, in Canberra, Australia.
I didn't know that. Is it still that way?
It is still that way. I think
so.
It's
you can grow your own, basically? Yeah. Is that how what people do?
Yeah. But the effect that it had on my generation was basically, I'm in two minds. I fundamentally agree with you that I think things shouldn't be criminalized to the point where, people are put in prison and these kind of things. The decriminalization of cannabis, however, dramatically affected my generation and my peers. And it was a vast, and I hear about this in the 70s as well. Penn Jillette is a fellow who lives in Las Vegas, talks about the experiences he had on the east side of Massachusetts when they partially decriminalized in the US. And the experiences he had and I had were very similar in terms of the best and the brightest of our generation basically being caught up in what was still, you see, decriminalization never really works properly because there's still an element of social criminality associated with it. It's a bit like prohibition in this country, there is still a group in this country which are, there's a social stigma associated with alcohol.
Oh, sure.
And I think the issues with regards to cannabis decriminalization...
That'll continue for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's inertia in that domain.
Generations, in fact. But, I mean, when I look at my peer group, and particularly a number of close friends, unfortunately, we exist in a society which is so heavily still driven with regards to things which are totally removed from the stuff that we discuss, that certainly the decriminalization of cannabis had quite a dramatic, and I'm sad to say, a negative effect.
Oh, I can understand. Yeah, all drugs are dangerous, and they need to be used as tools for expanding consciousness, not as party things.
Well, it wasn't a party thing. It was a depression thing. Where I come from also, up until very recently, had very high unemployment, particularly with regards to young people. There was a large disaffected youth population, and decriminalization of cannabis just kind of fueled the fire.
In that situation, you can see that happening. Yeah. But I don't really care what happens to other people. I've given up on Homo sapiens. I think they're a species that's time has passed, and I think it's going to take 30 or 50 years for most of them to die off.
I agree. However, when you are communally, as you are in a school, for example, when you are communally put together with people and you have various experiences, for example, they then moved into heroin decriminalization, which they never did. But they did sufficiently that the heroin users from out of New South Wales came to Canberra. And so you would have experiences where there would be syringes everywhere, these kind of things. You would see 13-year-old kids trying to hop PlayStations. So, I mean, my experience with regards to this was very real.
But that's not a comment on drugs. That's a comment on a society.
Exactly. Oh, without question. I
the drugs. Totally. We need to reform society. Not society. We need a new human being.
Yes.
We need people who don't think the way the old language monkeys do.
Yes.
And nothing short of that is going to make one bit of difference, as far as I can see. Putting a new government in there is irrelevant. We need to change the species. Are you familiar with Douglas Rushkoff's
work with regards to language modification? Doug Rushkoff did a series on PBS 2000-2001 about the manipulation of language with regards to a wide variety of issues, and how there were these think tanks that were actually generating new terms, which then very quickly were picked up and changed public consciousness. It's called, I want to say it's called the Sultans of Spin, but I think it's something along those lines. Anyway, that I think what is happening, unfortunately, Douglas Rushkoff.
How do you spell it?
Rush, as in Mount Rushmore, Koff. PBS, I think it was the Sultans.
And his first name was what?
Douglas. Okay. But Rushkoff.com, as in Rushmore, RUSHKOFF.com.
Okay.
Is his online presence. But I agree with you entirely. My concern is that the stuff that you are describing is actually being used against us. So we are in a counter battle situation.
Can I put this all into a larger perspective? Because this will. I agree with you. Everything you're saying is true, but it's none of my concern.
I understand that.
Yeah, and mainly it's because I don't actually see. Actually, I think evolution is not the model I subscribe to for this planet. It's not a bad one. I don't have any objections to it, but I think it's limited. And I think it's quite possible that Earth is developing, not evolving, that it actually does have an end point. And it seems clear to me, especially if you're familiar with the concept of punctuated equilibrium, that we are living at a time of the emergence of a new species and actually the transformation of the planet. We're moving into a new epoch of planetary development. And what's happening is not something we are doing. I mean, we humans. We are embedded in a larger system that has its own dynamics, and those of us who can learn to accommodate ourselves to that and contribute to it will survive, and those who don't will be gone.
So, I have a chapter in a book called The Origin of Life, which argues basically that point.
Oh, really? So, that sees Earth as an organism with its own developmental course. Yeah,
from submicrobes through to the UN, through to everything.
Right, okay. Yeah. That seems that to me. See, that's not a debatable issue. That's just where I start.
exactly.
And then the repercussions of thinking that way lead me to think and act in certain ways.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I understand.
So that's why I don't give a shit about all their manipulation and the politics and the money and the Illuminati and the builder bankers and all that shit. That's all part of the caterpillar, and it's on its way out, clearly.
So in existing independently to society, in existing away from these things, you live in Southern California, don't you?
Yeah.
So you're really surrounded by that whole
yeah, I'm
environment.
right in the middle. I live in Orange County.
As you talk, my wife is from Orange County, so I know the area well. So so you're intellectually removing yourself from the environment whilst actually being completely surrounded by it.
Well, to me, again, there are these two worlds. There's the Matrix and there's Squish. I live in my body. I park my body at a certain place, my monkey, and I go places and I live in Squish, my three-dimensional reality. But my real life is here in the Matrix. This is what counts.
Are the ways that Squish can turn off the Matrix?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Are the ways in which, for me, for example, there are various financial constraints where Squish could turn off the Matrix. And
I would be tragic. If I was out of the Matrix, I would cease to have a meaning to live, almost.
So you couldn't.
See, you're married and have a family. I'm a monk. And I live basically to spread ideas.
I love to spread ideas as well. I think what you're describing here is that one can exist perfectly well in the Matrix and still have Squish around.
Well, I still need Squish. I need to pay. I need to feed my monkey.
Certainly, but this is my point. This is my point here, because certainly, in the environment that I come from, in terms of developing technology, in terms of that being by means of survival.
Yeah.
In the past 10 years, I've had 7 jobs. I've had 5 companies close on me. I've had 1 section close on me, and I've had 1 international move.
Yeah.
So I've gone through situations, and prior to that, when I lived in Australia, the early development of Noble Ape was very rustic. I would miss meals and stuff in order to get the Matrix, in order to have the internet. And people would come give me food in order to use the internet because I had a good internet connection.
Yeah.
So I know, look, we are like minds here.
Yeah.
We are both in the Matrix.
Well, the
very
thing
much
is, you're
so.
better at juggling the two worlds than I am. I realized that there was no way I could get married and have a family and do that and fulfill my obsession in linguistics. That was too much of an obligation, too much responsibility for me. So I just said, well, I'm going to have to choose, and so I chose.
I guess the two have never been competitive for me, because I think basically what you described is, and the interesting point with regards to the Matrix identity is I think it exists independently of the ability to have access to the internet. I could perfectly easily work away from the internet, and did for periods of time, and then propagate my ideas through brief contact points. So I would generate something.
But that's expensive, isn't it?
No, not at all. Not at all.
You have to go somewhere.
Okay, so when
you have to get a hotel room and go to a conference.
Let me explain this circumstance to you. So when I was in the Bay Area through the .com period, all was wonderful, and then basically everything kind of collapsed, and I ended up in a place called Leicester, which is just north of London, living in a YMCA because I had various legal battles going on in the US and was living in this environment which was basically housing refugees who were about to be deported.
Yeah.
So the circumstances there, for example, the fleas were so bad that they ate through my big toe down to the bone.
Jesus.
The people next door...
I guess I'm going to have to quit complaining.
I'm saying these are real circumstances. No, but I'm saying these are real circumstances, and I think the idea of nationhood is something that you should probably understand in this context as well, because if I was an American, the people I knew who had similar experiences in the US didn't have to leave the US rapidly. I left the US with a day worth of a visa, waiting for another visa. I ended up in the Leicester YMCA. Yeah. However, through these periods of time, and I've had similar periods of time, I refocused on my primary work associated with Noble Ape and cultivated in its own environment on the laptop. And then through my abilities to work, I was working. The irony was I was working as a engineer for Ericsson at the time. I found a job relatively quickly, and then was able to take what I had developed in my isolated matrix back onto the matrix. In fact, that whole period of time was very revitalizing for me because Ericsson flew me all over the place and I existed independently but was able to continue. So I don't think the internet is, well, for me anyway, personally, I don't think the internet is really critical. I can develop away from the matrix and then push the stuff back on the matrix, which is really an open source paradigm.
You're right. I could go, well, but my work now, see, that's what I did. I existed without the matrix for, 35 years. But the matrix is what allowed me to start connecting up with other people. I've already done my work. My job now is to hook up with other people and find people who have complementary pieces of the puzzle that I have. So a large part of my job now is why I do these podcasts, is to meet. I met you because of this somehow. That's my job now, is to hook up with other people and find ways to collaborate.
So
without the web, how can I do that?
Well, this is my question. The 35 years prior to the web, the Heron of Squish, prior to reaching the matrix, what was your life like over that period? I was a hermit.
Like I said, I read, I studied, I wrote. I have 14,000 pages of handwritten journal pages. Okay, so I read, I studied, I went to seminars, I taught some stuff here and there, and that was it. I mean, I worked. I was a piano tuner for almost 20 years. That was perfect. Well,
we have another passion there as well, Heron. Very good.
What, do you tune pianos too?
I've been known to. In the past, I had a very old piano in Australia, which is a story for another time. But no, very good, Heron. Okay, so this is giving a greater kind of tapestry to who you are, which is basically another reason that I wanted to have this conversation. As well.
Oh, this is great.
So you tune pianos.
Yeah. It was good for about 20 years. You make pretty good money. I mean per hour, and that was the main thing. Is I'd only tune 3 or 4 pianos a week, and that was enough.
In Southern California, were you in Southern California at the time?
Yeah.
Oh, so you had the pick of some amazing, probably some of the nicest pianos in the U.S.
Oh no, I was a shitty piano.
Oh, okay.
I'm not that good. I'd be afraid. I wouldn't tune a piano for anyone who knew anything about pianos.
Okay. Very good.
The people I tune. I mean, if I went in and saw a nice grand piano, I knew I was in trouble. I mean, I could do it. And very few times did people actually say, "Well, this doesn't sound quite right." That made me real nervous when they started doing that.
And this also explains your obsession with sound as well. Do you have perfect pitch?
No, I don't.
No, but I am, one of the other things I've done is I taught English as a second language for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I developed a whole new method for teaching speaking and hearing skills based on my experience as a musician, basically. It became really clear to me that the reason people can't speak like an American is because they don't hear like an American. They are actually listening with Korean ears. And until they learn how to hear, that the job in pronunciation is to actually teach people how to hear. And that is easy. And it can be automated easily on the web. It's the simplest thing in the world. What I actually did in the classroom was very inefficient because I could only work with like 8 to 10 people at the most at a time. But I could actually be more effective. I mean, software could be more effective and deal with thousands of people at a time and actually provide a better feedback service than I was able to do in person.
Are you a native Southern California?
Yes.
So you've seen a number of riots then?
Oh, yeah. I was right in the middle of the first one. I worked at a photography studio at the time, and one of the guys got a bright idea to go down to Watts and take pictures.
My wife's grandmother is also a native Southern Californian, and she remembers the riots from the 40s and
I miss those.
And, yes, so no, Southern California has a fascinating history with regards to just kind of an ethnic pressure cooker in some regard.
Oh,
but
yeah.
also
Everything in the world is here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great place. I love it. It's I mean, you love it and you hate it. I mean, it's both.
It was too much for my wife. When we moved back here in 2005, I got a job in LA, and my wife took one look at the area. She saw some kids on the corner with some baggy pants and said we're not staying there. Here. So, But I love that. My first experience of the US was coming to LA in 1990. My father was an academic at UCLA, and I went, because he couldn't look after me, I went to summer school. And it was in, I'm trying to think of the area now. Not Glendale.
How old were you at the time?
I was 13, 14.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And they were busing in kids. I was one of 2 white kids in the whole school. And it was an amazing experience to me.
And you had come here from Australia?
Australia. Yes.
Okay.
So, and everyone was just so friendly and so warm. In Australia, in particular, there were just, I mean, my background, it seems really ridiculous to even describe it as mixed here. But my father is from Eastern Europe, and my mother is kind of 5th generation Australian. So, from my perspective, there were these 2 kind of cultural elements, and in Australia it was always slightly.
Your father was born in Europe?
My father was born in the UK. His father was born in the UK, but basically they were part of a ghetto.
So
they had come over.
From originally, in what language did they speak?
Yiddish primarily, but they came. My grandfather on my father's side, my mother says this, was a Mongolian ancestry and came from even further east. Oh. But they're crazy. So anyway, in Australia, you could tell Protestants and Catholics by looking at them. You could tell people of Irish descent. And there was this visual thing, which obviously Australian listeners are probably going to react to very, very strongly. But there was always this kind of visual element to the outsider in Australia. Uh-huh. So when I moved to LA, and it was only a very brief period of time in LA.
And how long were you in LA?
Probably, I want to say 6 weeks at most.
Oh, good. That's perfect for a 13-year-old.
So anyway, I was there, and I was welcomed in, and we lived just opposite Rhino Records, actually. So I would go to Rhino Records, and I'd buy these LPs, these
and what year was this again?
It's 1990.
1990. Okay.
So
that's why you're just a young whippersnapper. Okay.
Oh, I'm in my early 30s. So no, that really changed. And I think in terms of coming back to the US, because pretty well through, I mean, Apple offered me a job when I was 19, and I seriously considered moving to the US to take that, but I was finishing my studies at the time. So I've always had a relationship with the US. In terms of being a place that I would probably.
Why are you in Las Vegas of all places?
When my wife decided that LA wasn't the place that we were going to live, she has 2 sisters living here.
Okay.
For the first year, I commuted both to LA and San Francisco. I had consulting jobs, but we ended up in Las Vegas. I don't know. It's a very it's kind of like a post-apocalyptic war zone with a party going on in the center. I mean, it really. I think
that's a good one. I like that.
And I think in terms of my nihilism, which you're also touching on, it really is a place which I feel is a sense of. And when people ask me where I'm from, I say Las Vegas. I mean, I'm just like, can't you tell? I mean, the accent.
Vegas. Yeah, so, I have a Las Vegas accent.
Exactly. So no, it's funny. I mean, I feel in some regard as you do as a hermit, and I have a library that I kind of cower in, and I do these kind of things. But it is a very. I agree with you, but I think it's the idea that what we are also doing here is also conveying elements of humanity as well. And I think certainly listening to your previous history, you don't exist just as a hermit. You also actually really like the conversation. I mean, that is fundamentally Squish.
Absolutely, yes. This is as good as life gets, man. You know?
Yes.
This is, yeah. You know, I'll tell you what interesting has been happening to me lately, just because this is actually the first thing that's made a fairly large difference in the way I think about much of anything in years. I have a 28-year-old son that I haven't seen since he was 1 year old And I won't go into all the details, but it was.
You mentioned this to your Australian caller, so I've got the background.
Oh, you heard it? Okay, well,
yes.
This is just all come, and he called me about a week ago or so.
Mm-hmm. Does he live in Southern California?
Oh,
as
yeah,
well?
I'm sure we're gonna get together in the next few weeks. You know,
So this idea of being a professional philosopher, how does he embody that through any? Does he do?
Apparently, apparently he and I are quite similar in that
Okay.
way. I mean,
In
I've
the
only
hermit
talked
way
to
or
him
the
for 1
philosopher way?
hour. I'm sorry, wait, what?
In the hermit way or the philosopher way, or in all ways?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know him. I mean, I've only had one conversation with him for maybe 40 minutes. So, but his girlfriend told me that he's very philosophically oriented, and he said one of the things he said during our conversation was that. I mean, I can't remember the exact words, but essentially he was saying that he has a part to play in the transformation of the earth. He's not quite sure what it is, but that he's committed to that, to participating in the transformation of the planet. So, hell, that sounded good to me.
So, in terms of the political, in terms of the environment, what aspects in particular, or is this just a general calling towards the transformation of the planet?
I don't know. Like I say, he and I have a lot to talk about. You know, the first conversation was somewhat scattered and all over the place, and you know, it's going to take us a long time to get to know each other. So it's going to. My sense is it's going to be really fun to find out.
So you're seeing yourself with regards to the other now. Is this the whole point? Your son represents the other fundamentally now.
The other?
Well, you exist as a hermit, which means that you see yourself as being self-contained.
Oh, no, I don't see that at all. No, see, that's not true. That's just where my monkey, as far as my monkey is concerned. I am actually so dependent. That's why I say I'm dependent upon the web. The people like you that I talk to are what's important in my life. You know, and there's Bushra from Morocco, and Kathy in Australia, and Tom in the UK, and Dave, and all these people that are vital to my existence now.
But they haven't come from your body like your son has.
No, but you know, I don't really much care about genetics. That's one of the things that I'm still really clear about. The fact that he's related to me genetically doesn't interest me in the slightest. Although, I mean, I understand that part of it. I mean, I was adopted, and when I met my natural mother and my brother, all sorts of things about myself became quite clear. You know, that I never had seen by being raised by adoptive parents. And so I'm clear there's a biological thing, but that's just one of those, that's the biological thing, and that's part of what's going to make it so interesting for us to get together and learn who we are, you know.
At what age were you adopted?
Oh, from birth. It was set up before I was born. So, you know, yeah, a family doctor arranged the thing with, you know, it's a long story. I mean, I've probably talked about it. I'm not, you know, it's just we probably don't need to go into it. But anyway, it was arranged, and yeah. So, and my parents broke it to me at some point quite young. Such that I don't even remember when they told me. It's like I sort of always knew, but it just didn't really make any difference to me.
In terms of your exposure to Terence McKenna, how did you get that? Did you meet him personally, or have you heard his recordings?
I met him once, and I exchanged some emails with him long, long ago. And I've listened to much of his stuff and read most of his books, and I think he's one of the most fascinating speakers I've ever heard in my life. I just love listening to him talk.
Are you familiar with Lorenzo Haggerty's podcast, The Psychedelic Salon?
No, I'm not. Why? No, well, The Psychedelic Salon sounds familiar. I don't know the name.
Because
the other name.
He's been, you probably live on each other's doorsteps, but he's been republishing all of Terence's work and a number of other people's work in podcasts.
What's his name? Lorenzo
Haggerty, but The Psychedelic Salon or Matrix Masters, matrixmasters.com. Will get you. I mean, you are like-minded souls.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. So that's yeah. Okay. So it's matrixmasters.com. Okay.
But Lorenzo Haggerty, there's a spelling of Haggerty with one G as opposed to two Gs. Okay. But anyway, he's republished almost all of Terence McKenna's work in audio form the fascinating thing about McKenna was that he was a bibliophile. I mean, he read just a vast quantity of text, and in terms of his ability to recall it, I think that's really the strength of his speaking. There have been,
he comes up with this stuff.
Certainly. Well, it's stream of consciousness stuff.
It's amazing.
Yes, yes. But Bruce Damer has also appeared on that, and he's a fellow who I've mentioned previously, but he met McKenna later in his life, and Bruce Damer was also adopted, but Bruce Damer was adopted, and he's talked about this in the salon, which is interesting. It always strikes me in terms of the other distinction. He was adopted, I'm not sure, but enough time that he has early recollections of being in an orphanage. And this ultimately changed his views, although he's very close to his adopted parents. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting psychological thing, I think.
Well, that would be very different to have memories of a time before being adopted than my experience, because, like I say, I went home from the hospital with my adoptive parents. So there was. If I had that would be quite different to be aware of being adopted by somebody coming in and changing your life.
Certainly. And the striking thing with Bruce is he has put both his adopted and his actual father have passed away. He met his actual father relatively later in life, but he certainly had a relationship with him. He put the photos of his adopted father and his birth father together with photos of him, and you could see nature and nurture. Very striking.
Really? Wow.
He looks like his biological father, but the creases in his face, the life experiences,
the attitude.
Exactly, with his adopted father. And it's phenomenal because he looks like both men.
Wow. Are these pictures online?
Yes, they're part of. He's on Facebook, and I'm not sure what the Lorenzo is.
And this is Haggard. No, this
this is Bruce Damer.
Hold on, I'm going to write this down. What's his name?
Damer, Damer.com. We'll find him.
Okay.
And Bruce is a fascinating fellow, and again, a like-minded soul. But he lives in Northern California.
Well, see, I don't even care where people live anymore. That's the beauty of it. Here, you're in Las Vegas. I'm here in L.A. You might as well be in Canberra.
Okay. But I think, the phenomenon with regards to the artificial life community, we haven't talked about artificial life at all, but the phenomenon that has caught on recently has been the ability for, when you talk about isolation, particularly intellectual isolation, this has been the history of the artificial life community as well, in terms of people all over the world, prior to the internet developing their vast simulation. And then the internet came and, we all kind of amassed together. But the nature of actually being able to meet like-minded folk in collective groups, the talk I'm giving at Stanford is at one of these kind of meetings, although it's open to the general public, has changed the community in some way as well. I think I live, as you describe, in terms of the nomad. I think, for me, when I meet people that I've been working with for a decade, it does have an emotional impact on me.
Listen, I am looking forward to the day when I have the financial means to travel around to conferences and meet the people that have influenced me and share my ideas with them in Squish. It's just that's expensive.
Oh, without question.
And I'm not in a position to do that kind of stuff yet. But my intention is to be playing in that game over the next couple of years because if I want to put my work into the world, I need access to the people who are also interested in the stuff I'm interested in.
So that was the start of this call, fundamentally, was me describing this problem to you. So mapping out the next few years, how do you see yourself moving into Squish?
Good point. Well, I'll tell you, the podcast I think is integral to this thing. I know we talked about this before. You don't follow statistics, but I do on my downloads. And last week, I was my highest ever. I broke 1,000. Went from 962 2 weeks ago to 1342.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure next week it'll be down to 200. So, that's not a problem.
Chasing the dragon. That's the thing.
But
statistics is the heroine of the
trend is there. There are people listening to the stuff that I'm putting out there.
That's the important part.
And I'm getting contacts from them. So plus I intend to be teaching Gendo. So I come to the internet to try out talking about things to see what people understand and what they don't, and what actually moves them and what doesn't. And I figure I'm 2 or 3 years away from being able to basically open a school and teach Gendo.
How many podcasts do you listen to?
None.
None. So you don't see yourself as part of a... For example, there's a podcast called the C-Realm podcast that your listeners may listen to, which shares a number of the ideas that you described, takes it in different directions.
Wait a minute, what's that? I'm going to write this one down too.
C-Realm, R-E-A-L-M.
Yeah.
And the fellow's name, he goes by
is that crealm.com or something? Or
I'm not sure. I don't think it's .com. He has various blog spots. He's now living off the grid, but still releases a weekly podcast.
And his name is?
Well, he goes by the name KMO, just the initials KMO.
All right, so if I do a search for KMO and C-Realm, I'll find it.
He's quite popular, and I'm sure some of your listeners also listen to his stuff as well. He has tried progressively to translate... And I'm not sure, he probably has the same order of the shows that you have. I've appeared on his show one time, and he has the order, I'm not sure whether he has more than 200, but he's in the same kind of realm as you are. His shows are slightly more formal in terms of it being roughly an hour with a musical bit in between.
Yeah.
But it's it's quite slickly done. I mean, he has a sense of his audience. But he tried to translate this through to a tour. He toured up the East Coast and up the West Coast, having small group meetings with his listeners, and also with a fellow that he brought over from the UK.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't spoken to him since then. I have a fictional work that I'm trying to finish up and put out, which I want to pass on to him so I can get back on his show. The last time I was on, I was talking about exactly what we were talking about in terms of the Matrix and this evolution of a thing that is greater than us all and this kind of stuff. So he had me on his show to talk about that. But I haven't really gotten a sense of how his speaking tour went, aside from the fact that it was very hard work. I think the translation of what we do with podcasts... Now... My understanding is the difference between having 1,000 listeners and having 10,000 listeners or 100,000 listeners makes this thing a little bit easier. But I don't
that would make a big difference.
Yeah, well, I don't know. But
I'm not going to be doing a tour. I don't need Squish to do this. I think I can do this entirely on the internet. And if there's stuff to be done in Squish, special events, that's always fun, and that'd be great to do. But the core of what I'm doing is going to be in the Matrix.
So when you set this thing up, when you set up your podcast, you found TalkShoe and just did it through that initiative?
No, I didn't really set anything up. This just happened. I have 1,700 hours more recordings that I haven't even posted yet. Are you familiar with Skypecast?
Yes, you've just I'm familiar with it, and you've described this.
That's how it got started. That's what changed my world. I was a hermit until Skypecast. And immediately, I mean, it was one of my born again experiences. Immediately, I mean, the first hour I spent on that, I realized this is how I can find people around the world who are interested in the same stuff I'm interested in.
Certainly. But you didn't listen to others.
Pardon?
You didn't go out and listen to others as well.
No, I had no need to, because people were coming to me. And that was what I was there for. I was there to meet people and talk to people about the stuff I was interested in. And as soon as somebody came in and they were one of those people, then we just talked, just like you and I are talking right now.
I understand.
And that was enough. It wasn't a podcast. I mean, I recorded them, but I had no intention. I mean, I didn't do anything. Like I say, I have 1,700 hours of stuff that hasn't even been edited.
Yes.
And someday I probably will, because I had some great conversations with a guy who was translating a guy with his wife and 2 daughters who lived in an African village that was 40 miles from the nearest dirt road, to learn their language, to translate it into a Bible. You know, I mean, I talk to the most weird, the most interesting, fascinating people, and I've got all those things in there, but I don't even know where they are. So anyway, and then when Skypecast went down, I was desperate. I looked around, I found TalkShoe, and TalkShoe was good for a while, but TalkShoe, I hate TalkShoe now. It's just, I hate that place. You're the first guy I talked to in TalkShoe.
Is it because of the political? You mentioned the political and the religious
the people
aspect.
who go there. The people who go there are a bunch of morons.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, mostly. I mean, there are a couple. But anyway, then I discovered the Zeitgeist movement. And I mean, I'd known about the Zeitgeist movement. I'm not particularly interested in it, really, but it's full of a bunch of nice people. And I found out that they had this TeamSpeak 3 server, and that people in the Zeitgeist movement hang out there. And so that's all the podcasts that I've recorded in the last 4 months, probably, have been recorded on the Zeitgeist TeamSpeak 3 server. Because I have a room, a standard, permanent room there called Earthling, and
Yes.
people come in there, and that's where all these all the people I've been talking to are people I've met there. And so I only use TalkShoe for the RSS feed to iTunes.
So when McKenna says find the others, your vision of finding the others is actually talking out to the ether and seeing who comes back and wants to talk?
Well, that's the beauty of the Skypecast models. I can put a room name up called Gendo, a way of language. And most people, well, on TalkShoe, everybody already has seen that a million times, and they already know that it's not Christian and it's not American politics, so they're not interested.
I've never had any problem with TalkShoe. The stuff that you described, I've had one incident where a fellow came in, said that what we were doing with artificial life was wasting our time and we could be solving the world's problems, and then we pointed out to him that we actually were, quite fundamentally. And aside from that, I mean, I expect more. It's not the one. No, nobody comes in and is rude or interrupts. They're not interested. They all know what I'm doing, and they don't even come anymore. I guess the issue is actually working. I don't know. My experiences with TalkShoe, I was listening back to our chat, and this whole notion of, I guess, I mean, there must be people out there that are against what we're doing in some regard, if we have a kind of collective thing that we're doing.
Well, sure, a lot of people who would think, this is really bad stuff.
But I don't know. I just don't see I guess the whole notion of finding the others is that the others come very quickly.
Well, that's what it is. But the people I didn't find. Well, I said I found a couple. I can go back to Skype better, because there's more. Another problem with TalkShoe is there's no traffic here. On Skype, in an hour, I could put maybe 100 or 200 people through the room. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't stick, but they'd come in and listen for 10 seconds and leave, And so in a week, I'd probably put more than 1,000 people through my casts. And out of that 1,000 people, I would meet one or two that were actually damned interesting. So, but in a place like TalkShoe, where there's no traffic, where in a 2-hour, I mean, because I still do the show, just out of courtesy.
Do you do a monologue? What do you do?
I talk with people. If nobody talks, I don't do anything. I read. I do my podcast usually at Starbucks. And I always have a book. I'm always reading or writing or, doing stuff on my computer.
Have you ever done a monologue?
No, I'm not really. I do rants once in a while, but I'm not interested, really. I'm there for conversation, not to lecture. One of the things I used to start off with, and I'd say, is this ain't talk radio, and I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to be entertained by you, and what I'm entertained by is a good conversation with somebody who's interested in stuff that I'm interested in. And that was my intro. And then, basically, I just went away until somebody asked for the mic.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I've had one show where I've had to give a monologue because the person who I was expecting to call in didn't call in. And I got very positive feedback. It was actually about the notion that it was called The Quality of Artificial Life, and it talked about some of the stuff that we've described in terms of preparing yourself to be constantly broke and living in the YMCA and these kind of things. And it was a monologue which I thought, having completed it, no one will listen to this rambling.
It was more human, though. That's why.
And I've gotten positive feedback about that show.
Yeah.
But typically I don't have a problem, because I think the need to talk is something which is fundamentally Squish. I don't think these ideas exist in the Matrix. I mean, the computers that are transmitting this information have very limited concern associated with the information. But what we are doing here is a hybridization of Squish and the Matrix. I don't think it is just quintessentially.
Well, the distinction between Squish and the Matrix is somewhat artificial. So, yeah, there's not quite that simple.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, because the computer that I have here exists in Squish. So, right away, there's some problems there.
Well, Heron, you've given me a lot of food for thought. I did mention a chapter which I'm due to submit this evening, so my plan was to spend a bit of time working on it as well, but I saw that you were on Skype and thought I should probably chew your ear a little bit.
Oh, Tom, I'm so glad you did. Really, it's a delight talking with you.
I think the thing that I would leave with you is that you're not alone in any regard, both in terms of the conversation, but also in terms of these broader ideas. And I think there is an increasing number of people who are also broadcasting and writing these ideas down.
And there are a lot of people who aren't broadcasting or anything. There are a lot of people out. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this, is I keep putting this out there, and I know, and that's why it's encouraging to see the number of the downloads go up, because there are people listening who nobody knows,
Well, what do you count about the people that burn your conversations to CDs and give them to people?
Great.
There are all these kind of sort of ethereal ways. The obsession associated with the number, I think, is something you should probably wean yourself off.
No, I don't care. No, it's just good to know that it's going. Well, it doesn't. Listen, it was static at around 100 for a year. It didn't bother me. I didn't think I was failing.
Yes.
It's just I like to know what's going on. I want to know what the statistics are when I'm doing anything. It's just part of knowing what's going on. I don't use that to beat myself up or make myself feel good. But
have you ever held a party and had 100 people turn up?
Yeah.
So you're holding a party and you're having 900 people turn up. The distinction...
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, my sense with regards to these things, and this is,
it's not a personal thing. No, that's not it. The issue is it's sort of verification of my assumption that the trend on the planet is the direction I see it going in. There are people out there listening to this stuff. The stuff I'm talking about is weird shit. Most people don't care. But the fact that there are people out there who listen to this stuff and come back and listen to it again tells me there's a change going on. 20 years ago, it was very difficult for me to explain this to almost anybody, or 30 years ago. Now it's relatively easy. So to me, it's just verification of my hypothesis that the trend is in the direction that the planet is waking up. See, I'm actually expecting a kind of outbreak of enlightenment on the planet over the next, say, 30 to 50 years.
My parents had that anticipation. And that's always the thing that concerns me with regards to that anticipation, is that from that anticipation, I get the impression maybe they're slightly older than you are, but they had that anticipation and it was completely crushed through their lives, in terms of the sense that the people that held the power, that made the active changes, did not experience the same enlightenment.
Well, I was in the 60s, and we felt that then, and the naive part of that was to assume that we were gonna see it happen at that time. I think a little more realistic now, and of course I could be completely wrong. I might be nuts, but it seems to me that the time frame that makes sense to me is 30 to 50 years to see us essentially living on a new planet. It could get quite ugly. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising to see 80% of the human population gone in the next 30 years. I hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, then we'll have to deal with that too. But I think we are at an epochal change of the planet. This is bigger than anything humans have ever faced before. This is not just a change from one civilization. Well, maybe that's it. That's but even that's too small. This is a planetary shift that's occurring. So I say.
In terms of digital communication, in terms of the freedom to communicate with people the world over.
In terms of everything. In terms of the planet, like I say, I see this as something that Earth is doing. This is not something that humans are doing. Earth is doing this.
Certainly.
We are embedded systems. We talk in terms of our egos and our own desires and goals, and that's not an unreasonable way to talk about it, but it seems to me that seeing it in terms of a planetary development sheds light on things in really important ways.
Do you think Earth's ends are the same as our desires?
Well, I think our desires better get in alignment with what's actually going on. I mean, I think, it's just like if you talk about, an embryo of a tree frog, it's not going to develop into a petunia. It's going somewhere. It's going to be a tree frog. And any of the transformations that system goes through, there are all sorts of cell death in different parts of embryological development, and it's a very complex process, and all sorts of things go on. But in the end, the only cells that continue are the ones that support the system that's there. And I think that's a perfect analogy for what's happening to Earth right now.
Yes. You've left me a lot of food for thought, Heron.
Well, you have done the same for me, Tom. So
I'm going to conclude this chapter. I'm going to think more, and we shall reconvene at a later stage to finish off this conversation.
You can listen to it on the podcast later tonight.
It'll be probably tomorrow morning while I sit at my computer.
And we have established that it's okay with you that I post this stuff.
Most certainly. That's
You come
I live
here
in
with
this
that
domain
expectation.
as well.
Okay.
Very much so.
Yeah,
very
good.
much so.
Me too. All right.
You have a good evening. You enjoy your wine. We'll talk soon.
I've had a great evening. It's probably going to go downhill from here.
Well, enjoy your sleep. I take great solace and solve many problems through sleep. So I hope you do the same.
Okay, thanks. Good night.
Take care.